Initiatives at the Wild Center. Happy to see everybody. I know it's been a little while since I've been on a clean call, so I'm happy to be here today. Just making sure changing my name real quick. I'll just open it up to any announcements. Go ahead, Jim.
Great, thanks, Jen.
To raise my...
Oh, do you need to go, Katie?
No, I don't need to go first. Sorry, I didn't mean to unmute to say that. I was saying that to myself. I apologize. Go ahead.
We're starting to get telepathy here, right? We're hearing each other's thoughts. Let's see, this weekend is a great youth summit going on in the Intrepid Museum, which is in New York City. I think I'll put the link in a minute. I think an example where it's set up it's not specifically about climate, but climate is definitely a big part of it. And I think that's just a message off for us that there's participating or hosting events that are specifically climate, but then there's working with programs that where it's part of it. And so in this case, quite a lot on social justice, the question of young women and young women of color being in STEM. That's something we very much share with them. And this is their third year doing this. So this is a thing, again, I'll put that in. Another event coming up in a couple of weeks in the San Francisco Bay Area is organized by a newer organization, STEM Frenzy, but a similar one that'll be actually in Civic Center Plaza of San Francisco, right in front of City Hall. Again, an event, in this case, very much looking to have Black kids in the San Francisco Bay Area get access to STEM. And then they're just very happy that we have things on climate change that it's exciting. So I'll put those in, just a couple of events. Go on. Thank you.
Go ahead, Katie.
Thanks. Sorry about the mix up there. I just wanted to let everyone know we had one of 2 review camps for clean that we're having this summer. And we passed 35 new resources into the collection. So we'll start cataloging those, and then we'll have another review camp next week on Monday. And hopefully a similar number from that as well. So we have a lot of new resources this year that I'm excited about that we're going to try to put into clean. So yeah, just wanted people to be aware that we are working on that right now on the education side of clean. So thanks.
Thank you, Katie. Any other announcements? Looks like Eric, you shared a link in the chat.
Yeah, Jen, we're just, I'm going to be part of Seth, your institute, so looking forward to that. But also we're running a small one in the Bay Area in person, a 2-day at the beginning of August. So if folks know, especially people that are in the region, that you could share it with, that'd be great. We're not sure about the hybrid aspect of it at this point, so probably it's mainly in person.
That's awesome, Eric. We're also doing our own in-person Climate Institute this summer here in the Adirondacks. We have about 20, I want to say 27 to 30 teachers and informal educators, like kind of half and half, which has been really exciting. And just thinking about being back in person is a little overwhelming, but also just really inspiring and awesome, which is super great. And we are participating, some of the staff, Wild Center staff are also participating in Climate Gen's Institute, which is always the big inspiration. We look to their guidance and just inspiration always. The other thing I just wanted to mention is that we're also doing a youth leadership retreat this summer, and our registration closed yesterday. We were hoping for 25. We don't have a huge retreat center that we use. It's pretty small. We have 58 applications. So we're like, what are we going to do? So anyway, we're figuring that out, but it's just really exciting to see young people wanting to get back together and the energy and sort of the demand for it. So that's making us rethink a lot of things, so that I just wanted to mention that we're super excited and trying to problem solve how we can have some more youth join us for the summer. But it's just a 4-day institute, and that's in August. So it's fun. All right. Are there any other just mentions or also anything that anyone's doing that they want to share before I turn it over to Seth? All right, Seth, from Climate Generation, take it away. Let's hear about the Summer Institute.
Thanks, Jen. Yes, and I apologize as I don't have audio issues, but you're going to probably hear some background noise. We have a bathroom being redone, and right now they are drilling. So I will try to kind of keep that to a minimum. But yeah, I know that I have met many of you before, and actually many of you have either participated in the Summer Institute or been a cohort leader in the Institute. So I'll keep this fairly brief, but we wanted to share a little bit about the Institute this year, just to make sure everybody kind of has an idea of what's going on, but also to talk a little bit about the cohort model that we've been using over the last few years, as we do think it is kind of unique and hope that it can be replicated, especially as we know that educators are ready to go back in person. It's been really interesting talking to, right now I've talked to 60 educators that will be participating. Half are like, I'm all in for virtual. That's only the type of professional development I want to do. Another half are like, nope, I'm all about in person. And so it's really great that there are in-person opportunities. I'll try to keep an eye on the chat, but I'll go ahead and kind of get started. For those of you that don't know, Climate Generation was founded in 2006 by National Geographic polar explorer Will Steger, who is a lifelong science educator, environmentalist, and eyewitness to climate change through his 50 years of polar exploration. One of the first education programs that Climate Generation ever did was the first Summer Institute. And 14 of the 17 have been in person. Due to the COVID pandemic back in 2020, we started doing virtual. So this will be the third year that we've gone virtual. We've had, I think, at minimum 35 educators participate. Last year we had 340. And so that virtual component has really allowed us to expand both just our reach of who the educators that are participating are. Definitely our global scale. Last year, I think we had 40 states represented in 6 countries. And then it's also really allowed us to expand the type of presenter that we get. So I'll talk about that a little bit more too. About a year ago, Climate Generation updated our strategic goals and vision. And so we've decided to really focus on overcoming climate change, but scientific disinformation, to really center anti-racism and systemic equity, and to personalize and localize climate change action. And probably that last piece was really instrumental for us to really rethink how do we do the Summer Institute, especially due to it needing to be virtual. And so in that first year, we were incredibly fortunate to partner with both NOAA's Climate Office, Frank Neopold, and the Wild Center with Jen Kretzer to really think about how do we actually connect with educators and have trusted sources. And what we came up with is this idea of working with regional climate change and climate justice organizations to kind of do outreach, but also help actually plan the Summer Institute. Probably those first 14 years, we definitely partnered, but we were pretty insular and kind of focused on Minnesota and the Midwest. And this has really allowed us to kind of move beyond that. So for the last 2 years, we've been able to really think about what are the goals of this cohort model. And when we talk about that, that's basically partnering with other organizations to help develop the agenda, the schedule, the goals of the Summer Institute, but also, of course, help with marketing, outreach, all of that. And so we do hope that this will allow us to kind of expand the number of educators we're going to reach, but really we hope to be creating kind of a community of practice around climate change education best practices, climate justice best practices. And every year has been lots and lots of growth, lots of learning. As we know, Climate Generation is very aware we are not the only organization out there doing climate change education, and we are definitely not the best in any sector. So it's pretty amazing for us to learn from all these organizations. So who are these folks? Well, last year we partnered with 14 climate change and climate justice organizations from around North America in these 13 regional cohorts. And you can kind of see that, yeah, we had some really great regions, and then we had huge areas that we didn't have a solid partnership with somebody doing climate change education professional development. And that's kind of the big thing that we're always looking for is there's lots of climate justice organizations out there that we're missing, lots of folks doing like sustainability education, but we've really tried to partner with folks that already have kind of that background in professional development or are looking to move into that realm. So this year we kind of moved a little bit, and we're able to expand some of our regions, still having 13, but working with 15 organizations. And so you should be able to see we've kind of expanded into Alaska. We have a partner in Arkansas, kind of moved a few folks around. And so these are those wonderful organizations that are going to be joining us again this year. And I do apologize for the background noise. I think it will be done in just a second. But those 15 organizations have worked with us for basically the last 5 months to really think about what are the goals of the Summer Institute, who should we be inviting, how should we connect with educators, what are educators needing at an incredibly difficult time, and what is going to be kind of most successful. Yes, and as Katie said, we have a great partnership with CLEAN. The Wild Center was one of our kind of original cohort organizations. As I mentioned, we had a pretty great outreach last year of educators, and I'll talk a little bit about who those kind of educators actually consist of, but we're kind of on par to at least have that regional stance as well for educators participating. So this year, I think we're up to about 165 educators that have registered, which is pretty on par with last year, 32 states, 5 countries. You'll see that this is pretty typical. Majority are white educators. This year, we're actually split quite a bit between high school, middle school, and elementary educators, and then quite a few non-formal. I think that's where a lot of those others kind of get jumped into. And then something that has really changed since we went to a virtual model is the number of non-formal educators that have been interested in participating. I think before, just maybe the way that we did outreach and also kind of just set up the structure was primarily formal educators, but I think this has really allowed us to connect with non-formal educators that might not be working with the same students, but definitely are still trying to discuss climate change education. And I think also just with the organizations that we're partnering with in the cohort model, it's allowed us to kind of rethink who is our audience, who should our audience be. When Climate Generation started, we really did outreach to formal educators, and we definitely know that they are community leaders, trusted voices, but also kind of rethinking other types of educators that can work with communities to look at climate change solutions. So that cohort, group of cohort leaders looked at all of these kind of themes around the best practices of climate change education. And this year we kind of really narrowed it down to these 5 themes. And we use these themes to help market, but also these are kind of our strands. When educators are looking at synchronous sessions to choose, there'll be one of these 5 themes that they can choose from. Just to give you a little bit idea of the schedule, you hopefully have seen some of our marketing materials go out over the last few months, but this year we are doing 3 days of the Summer Institute across the week of July 18th through 22nd. What we did is July 18th and 19th will be we're calling them like our collaborative days. It will be a North American wide focus. This is where all of our 50+ presenters will be offering programs to educators through the Whova platform over Zoom. And then those regional cohort leaders were able to choose a day between July 20th and 22nd, either virtual or in person, to host their cohort day. And so you can kind of see, we of course have attendee mixers, keynotes, concurrent sessions, climate trivia, and then really moving into how do we take all this awesome information, but really make it relevant and sometimes state specific, but sometimes just kind of regionally climate impact zones as well. Last year we did day 1 and 3 on a North American scope, and the cohort day was right in the middle. And we found that that flow was a little off. And so we did kind of those 2 large focus days and now really narrowing it down. And our goal is out of this is that educators will leave feeling like they're part of a community of educators in their region that are interested in climate change education, have gone through somewhat of the same experience, and can kind of support each other moving forward. So as I mentioned, this year we'll have, I think it's right now we're at about 40 presentations from 50 different climate change education, climate justice leaders, sharing their experience either on curriculum, best practices, tips, strategies around how to help students and communities identify climate change impacts and solutions in their local communities. I won't go into all of this, but that cohort model has also really helped us identify the education or educator goals for the Institute of really focusing on self-efficacy, because that's a big thing that we've seen data about, is that educators just don't feel confident teaching about climate change education, whether that's lack of professional development opportunities, lack of state standards to help support them. But we've also seen that there are states that are moving into this realm of requiring climate change education being part of not only state science standards, but throughout the curriculum. And so we definitely need to be providing these opportunities. And we're obviously very lucky that there are organizations that are doing very specific or very regional professional development opportunities. And we're hoping that out of this, many more of those will keep happening, of course. We do, of course, that hope that educators will leave feeling confident, knowledgeable, but we also hope that, as I mentioned, that they will build a sense of community. I'd be able to identify best practices around climate change education, and also understand the necessity of climate justice being directly connected to climate change, and that without climate justice, we will never actually achieve true climate change solutions. I'll wrap it up here with just some of the details. When we were thinking about how to partner with all of these amazing organizations, we realized that, yes, there are some great benefits of building a community of practice, of organizations being part of this national institute, but we knew that there had to be some type of financial compensation as well. So in that marketing, you'll see that for most cohorts, the Summer Institute fee is $250. This year, we made an agreement with all the cohort leaders that there would be a baseline payment for participating in this cohort model of $1,000, which we know does not cover the time that folks put into this. But for every educator that participated in their cohort beyond 10 educators, they would also receive $100 per educator. And then we did have some funds to support, whether that be speaker fees, facility rentals. There's at least 8 hours of collaborative conversations that have come out of this, and really pushing us and each other to really think about, are we reaching educators the way we want? Are we talking about climate justice the way that it needs to be talked about? And are we being inclusive in our conversations with both educators and each other? We were fortunate enough to have still quite a few scholarships available for educators. So that's one big thing that I wanted to mention, is that if you know of any educators in your network that are interested in a virtual training in the middle of July, which we know can be a stretch, and are just kind of worried about that financial support, we do have quite a few. We are prioritizing BIPOC educators or educators that work in historically marginalized communities. But right now we still have like 55 scholarships available. And so I would recommend just applying. And I also want to mention that in September 2022, we're going to start thinking about what does the Summer Institute in 2023 really look like? And what does that cohort model look like? We are kind of rethinking, how do we connect with organizations across North America, knowing that many educators do want those in-person events, but knowing that we could possibly really support folks on a North American wide focus of still having national leaders connected. And so we're probably hoping to expand that cohort model to even more organizations. What exactly that will look like, we don't know yet. But if you do have any interest, know somebody that needs to be involved in this, definitely reach out. I'm just going to put my email in the chat there. But we're just looking to kind of start those conversations even now. As you saw, there's huge parts of just North America in general, but even here in the United States, that we don't have the support that we need to be providing for educators, at least on this national model. And then the final thing is, if you or anybody in your organization was looking to participate, doesn't have the financial support to participate right now, we are looking for volunteers to both help us in the those collaborative days, but also in our cohort days, because we are always looking to make sure we have the support we need for presenters, things like that. But we're also trying to support our cohort leaders to really think about, are we basically doing evaluation? Are we actually achieving the goals that we think we're or trying to achieve? And I'll make sure to put that call for volunteers in the chat as well. But that is where I'm going to wrap things up. And so I know there's lots of time for questions, but if you have any interest, would love to set up a time in the future. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Seth. That was awesome. It's so cool to see how you're thinking and what you're thinking about this year, and just having been, the Wild Center is a bit sad not to be a full partner this year, and I, we just didn't have that capacity. But I do have a couple of questions for you, because I just as you were talking, I've been thinking about this for a while. I mean, clearly, Climate Gen has such a I feel like such a reach in terms of the network of teachers that you have. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you support teachers like throughout the year. Because one of the things I think that Climate Gen brings as a strength is this sort of, and has the capacity for, is this support for teachers on a year-round basis. And, I'm just thinking about our own, our New York cohort that we're working with this year, or it's, some outside New York too, but like how might there be like these, how can we sort of like help each other, like support each other in these sort of like, we don't have a ton of capacity to support teachers throughout the year, but you guys do. So how is there a way that we can, I guess, direct teachers towards the resources that you have, but all stay connected and supported, so that it's like, I just think about it as this like safety net for educators, not just teachers, but educators, like creating this like national community of practice that are all working towards climate change education, that are thinking about it across in all the ways that you talked about through your goals. And are there ways that we can strengthen that, like Eric's doing Eric and Clean are both doing, well, Eric, you're doing an in-person thing, right, for 2 days in August. So for those of us that have started doing the in-person things again, like how can we direct them to the virtual, and like I don't know. I'm just trying to think about how to build the support systems
Yeah.
and a flexible infrastructure that is meeting teacher and educator needs and is I don't know. I don't know if I'm making sense at all.
I think I can answer most of that. Yeah, those are great questions though. So ideally, this is definitely something we talked about within our cohort model, but it always comes down to things like capacity. And ideally, we have this group of educators that are participating in something called the Teach Climate Network, which I put a link in there. And we do look at that as a year-round kind of thing where we come up with these themes, these goals in the Summer Institute, and then not only the folks that have participated in like the Midwest cohort, but anybody over the next 11 months, we provide things like professional development workshops. We put out a monthly resource newsletter. We have things like Teach Climate Twitter chats. And so we have these opportunities, and our goal is to stay connected with these educators that have expressed an interest, have taken a 3-day, pretty intense experience, and still have support throughout the year. Some years we're really successful in maintaining those connections. Some years we struggle. I know that the New York City Department of Education that has worked with Jen to be some of those cohort leaders, they're still in touch with about 10 New York City specific educators, and still doing pretty awesome work about 2 years after they first met. And that is our dream, is that we're creating these little pockets of educators that are supporting each other. And then every year, every 2 years are coming back, getting some more professional development opportunities, and connecting, of course, with their regional network or regional hub, but still having the support of a nationally focused organization. I think that's the big thing, is that I think I talked about this, but Climate Generation definitely was Minnesota Midwest focused. And over the last 6-7 years, we've really moved past that. We might be looking back. We've got some grant opportunities that we're working with Minnesota specific educators, but our focus is to connect with educators across the United States and potentially North America as a whole. And that's where I definitely want to connect with folks that are doing those in-person opportunities, maybe being part of the cohort model. It's pretty intense, might not work out, but at least supporting each other and thinking about how we can support educators so that they have the resources that they need. I'll turn it back over to you, Jen. I haven't been keeping an eye on whose hand. I think it's Jim,
Yeah, I
right?
think Eric. Oh, sorry, Jim or Eric. Jim, go ahead.
Great. Thanks, Jen. And thanks, Seth. Of course, very much looking forward to the Climate Institute again on a great event. So a question would be getting your thoughts on how, what I often have to do as we have events going on is talk to the educators that I work with, right? And to see, specifically groups of people who are going to be part of different events, either as presenters or just there during the summer in the next few months. So there's a question of which ones to recommend for which people to go to, right? Now I have the capacity to go to a lot of events, and I think I also have a capacity of time and just also maybe the history and things where, I'll feel more comfortable being at kind of events that I don't think some of our other people would be comfortable at, right? It would be like, this is a bad recommendation for us, right? We should have been somewhere else. Instead, Jim, you tell us what happened. So specifically what I have is 2 categories of educators. And one is educators who are under the age of 18, or say the age of 22. And I would be insistent that there are a good number of people who are very serious. Some of the best educators in the country are actually under 18. They don't have a teacher's credential, they don't have a class, but they support teachers and they teach a lot of people, both young and old, about it. And the other are people who are educators out in the community, who do community events, who overwhelm, at least in California, the majority of which are African American and people of color. They are not credentialed teachers either. They, though, have been educating for a long time, and they're very well recognized, and they're very good at bringing climate science and climate action to the public. Well, so one of the questions comes in where I'm going is, you can go to these events, and it's one thing when you go in and you have the attitude of, which is good. I want to learn from what other people are doing, even if they're in a different category of education than they are. I want to learn what they're doing, and we're going to be receptive. We're going to recognize you have your field, your subfield, and I have my subfield, and we'll work together. There's another one where you come in and basically you're getting the messages. If you're an educator, you have to do it our way. You have to be who we are. You're not doing it the way we are, so you're doing it wrong. And you're not us. You're not a white teacher in a school, right? And so we don't take you seriously. That, of course, I know that's not your message. I know that's not what you're about. I know that's not what it's about. But it's hard. I can tell people to go to a place and still that's their takeaway, that they're not taken seriously as an educator. And so I don't like to recommend those because it's just really messy. So how should we handle that? If it's me and a couple of us go in and we feed back to it, that's fine. I mean, I will do that, but just kind of, I don't want to make a decision without checking with you. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And it's definitely something not only Climate Generation's education team, but I think the cohort team has also really thought about is the Summer Institute for Climate Change Education, historically it's been formal educators, which data all points to white educators in the sciences. We definitely have been moving away from that, but I think we're definitely still stuck in some of those things. I think what has allowed us to change a little bit is the presenters that we're asking. We definitely want formal educators to be able to share their experience, their success stories, like this is possible with teachers, but we're also having folks that might be in climate justice with Black Lives Matter, folks that do traditional ecological knowledge. And so I think we are pushing away from that, but I do think we're still stuck in some of those kind of historical trends of white science educators at least registering for events like this. And so I definitely think that is a challenge of like, how do we actually say, no, this is for you? One big change, not exactly what you're talking about, but big change over the last 2 years has been elementary educators saying, oh, this is something I could think about of how to incorporate. So I don't know exactly how to answer that, Jim. I think one big thing is youth. We probably, especially in our scholarships, have not gone into offering it to folks that are under 18. I think the biggest thing is just like what we asked our scholarships to support, our donors. We're supporting educators that work with students. I think that's definitely something we need to think about. And you've been really great about like pushing us like, no, we need to be thinking about youth being involved, not only as potentially presenters, but as participants. And I think that's something that we will continue to kind of move forward on. I think we're still definitely kind of formal educators, folks over probably 22, 23, being the main participants. But it's definitely something that maybe next year you need to be a cohort leader and really be pushing us to do that, Jim, because I think those are great suggestions, but definitely a challenge. And so I'll have to think about that a little bit more, at least how do we share that message? Because it is a challenge. I mean, even in our cohort partners, we're like 80% white educators or white-led organizations. And so it's definitely a struggle to actually be like, yes, we're a trusted resource, but yeah.
Eric?
Thank you, Seth.
Thanks. Great questions. Really excited about the Institute, Seth, and all that you're doing. Just a couple thoughts came to mind. One was based on what Jen was mentioning about the community of practice. I think that vision for a community of practice at sort of the national level is a really great idea, because educators need that, as Jen, you mentioned, that year-round support. And especially what you mentioned about the K-5 educators, not fully knowing how to sort of integrate climate science education or climate education in general. Even if it's not the science, it can be, much broader than that. So I think that's a great, idea. And it's interesting because your map sort of suggests that sort of that central part of the country is not represented. And I'm guessing most of those states have not adopted NGSS standards. So I think there's some synergy there, so anyway, I think that, and so the institute we're running is kind of, it's based on some work that I had done years ago, and on also a sort of a local scale. So it's kind of the opposite, going the opposite direction, or, starting local, and, so I'm looking forward to the synergies between them and really learning about sort of the best practices. And I think centering it on environmental justice and equity are getting to some of the things, Jim, that you're mentioning, that by really bringing those and making those main tenets of that, hopefully that will make it attractive for folks. And for those, again, for the primary educators, teaching about climate change specifically at the K-5 level is challenging, but to teach components of it, like sustainable gardening, what is the atmosphere, some of the basic concepts that are building blocks for the middle school and high school students to really understand the broader systems dynamics and climate are really important. So I think that piece, I think what we're finding is that folks really do need sort of that climate science 101 too. There's often just a call for what is climate change? How is it different from weather? And I think the regional models are very powerful because it really plugs people into what's happening in their region specifically. The examples from California, the wildfires and the Lake Mead drying up, and the red air, so all those things are top of mind for folks here in the West. So that those pieces, those place-based pieces and examples are also super important. So just more, I guess, more comments about process, and looking forward to engaging and just hearing what you're saying, Jen, about this idea of a support structure that is available. The other one I would mention, and maybe you're already connected to them, I didn't see them necessarily on the list of partners, but the Climate Reality Project, is global, right? And they also it's all about climate communication, and they're, these are sort of the informal educators, a lot of them. So they're not even necessarily in a career of being an educator, but they do that's their main role, is to communicate, right, with their audiences and meet their audiences where they're at and when they do their presentations. So just another connector to a broader large-scale network that I'm sure you're aware of, but maybe there's some synergy there. But thanks again for the presentation and effort.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Go ahead.
Thanks,
Jen.
Eric, for those comments. No, I just wonder, one of the things that, again, thinking about where, everyone is so stretched in terms of the capacity piece, and like, how can we, one, provide an opportunity for a better support structure for educators, like, and I guess I'm using educators because I definitely feel that coming from the informal side as well, like big time, like we're seeing it, like I'm just hearing it too, like from my colleagues in the informal education space, of that need for not just sort of understanding sort of the intersectional nature of climate change, but actually like all that 101 stuff that I think at one point I was like leaving behind. And I know last year when we did the institute, the Climate Change Institute, that was like feedback that I remember that we got. Am I speaking correctly, Seth, that we gotten feedback through that like we weren't giving enough of the like climate science, like people really needed to understand, like, this is the science, these are the impacts, like and like that was something that was really critical. But then sort of then there's this like intersectional piece that comes in that is like a whole other layer of unpacking, because it's so complex. And anyway, this is when I start to get like all excited about like, oh, we need an NSF proposal to like establish a national network of climate change educator, I don't know, but like something that would, again, provide that capacity to support educators where they're at, meet educators where they at and where they are around the whole course of the whole year. Like, anyway, it's just me dreaming. Oh, it looks like you said that you've brought back a bit of the climate change educator track.
Well, like so yes, historically, I think we really had especially our in-person institutes, have really done like pretty big climate science. I would say probably last 3 years, we've moved a little bit away from like, here's the climate science, because we do struggle even within our education team. Like, does it matter to understand the climate science to take action? What we are realizing is that educators feel like they need to understand it to feel confident to then say, well, here's the solution. And I don't know if it's necessarily pushback from their students or just like, no, I need to understand like what is happening so that I can explain it to whomever. And so this year we definitely brought back a few more speakers and like I'm new to climate education. Here's the track that I'm going to take so that I'm getting some really cool kind of boundary breaking stuff, but I'm also understanding like, why is this happening? Why are human impacts actually causing this? What are the impacts in my local area? And then how do I take those and move into solutions?
I do think that it's kind of just interesting. Like we hear it, because we're opening this new climate solutions exhibit that's all about climate solutions. There's no climate, like it's not like climate science 101. It's not happening in that space. We have a science hemisphere. It can happen over there. But what we're finding from staff is like, well, we really need the climate science. Like we need to understand what's happening. We need to understand the impacts that are happening locally. And then we can talk about solutions. It's like it's just really interesting. And I'm like trying to understand it from just like almost like a human behavior perspective. Like, is it the need to feel comfortable, like that knowledge base, like having that science knowledge base gives you confidence? Like, is that where it's coming from? I think it could be in part, and I would just be curious what others think about that. But like, and like, then if you have the confidence and you have some understanding, like as a, like all of our staff are undergoing our climate solutions training, like for this climate exhibit, like everyone from facilities to development to, our finance office, like everybody gets it. And then the program staff, but how do we sort of, there's so much information out there, like what is practical for people to learn and then how to take that to the next level. But what we're finding is that the science, like we can't, like we tried starting with the solutions first and that actually wasn't enough. Like we went back and like then went back to the science piece. Grounding as a foundation.
Well, and I definitely think that is really important because as even Eric talked about, there's like still this, I was talking to an educator the other day and she works with high school and she's like, they're still struggling with like weather and climate and how like even understanding that is so key to understanding like why scientists are so concerned and why certain regions are going to be way more impacted than others. And that one even week, like even our spring here in Minnesota has been historically cool. Well, let's look at the last 10 years of whether that's actually the general climate and all of that. So yeah, I think it's really important to talk about. I'm just making sure I didn't miss anything in the chat, but.
Hannah gets the gold star, like having to jump in and teach bio and environmental science.
And like, I live in Taunton, Connecticut. So like, we're pretty, like we just passed some unfunded mandate that all students K-12 need to have some climate education, but there's no training. Like I was the environmental person at my school, but I took like an evolutionary bio class, but that's not environmental. So, and I did the whole like, and my ed program is like one of the top 10 on the East Coast. So, what does that say about our priorities as formal educators and whatnot? So, if you need a grad student for that NSF grant, I'm here. If you can pay me, maybe. Or if I can get a dissertation out of it, but that's like, I would love to know about electives, like how many states have an environmental science elective and like what's going on with that. Like, because if you're one environmental science teacher in one school and you have no network and you teach 4 other classes, like what, you don't have time to even think about, so that's my ramble, but definitely not gold star material, just like neat, on the ground, just what teachers do because they have to.
Well, I think all teachers get gold stars right now, so that's, part of it. What? Oh, Jim, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand up.
Let's see, reflecting a little bit on the question of action and solutions and the need for science will come in things. I mean, I'm not just trying to throw stuff out that we have, but relevant to this is if we define action or solutions as strictly political, as in we're going to get someone elected, we're going to try and get a bill passed, we're going to try and do something along that line. In the United States currently, absolutely, you don't need science. I mean, political arguments are made all the time that are just scientifically garbage, right? They even say science isn't wrong or all kinds of things. So yeah, if you're in politics, you can do it. I don't consider that to be good politics. I don't think that's good action, but you can do it. If you're looking at students, if your public, if your teachers are going to be involved in STEM-based action, something that uses science, uses engineering, if you don't have good science, you're wasting your time and you're teaching people garbage. You're teaching people solutions that aren't really solutions and everything. I just say that because that's very practical for we who work with students to take action on climate change. You have to have your science right. And one of the things we're encountering is a question that we've had a lot come up in Clean over the years of like how we depict how the greenhouse effect works, right? I mean, the question of understanding infrared and understanding heat and everything. When one is taught the wrong ways that are the dominant ways it's been taught, your solutions are off. The things that we do, like the picture behind me of making the Capitol Hill more energy efficient, you have to understand infrared correctly. Otherwise, you would never know how this works. You wouldn't use it right. Our students have to do it. What I'm getting at is you can't do STEM-based solutions if you don't teach climate science, because they're basically two sides of the same coin. The things that are the problem are the things that help us do the solution of it. That's just a kind of a thought on the one of where I think, yeah, we would stumble very quickly if we don't include the science in what we're teaching. We're not going to get the solution. The one I raised to you, Seth, related to it is, what do we have on the there's the subject of, let's see if I can approach this the right way. There's the subject of, as we teach about science-based climate action, we know that there are influences in society that are trying to divert us or stop us or have a different take on it. That's not their motivation. That's not what they're doing. That's not their history. They do things and they influence what we're doing about how we can keep up with that and know what's going on. And what I bring up is, I think people can intimate what I'm getting at. There's certain industries that are very, very good at that, and they do things. And part of what they've done is make it so it's very hard to be a good climate educator and be in the formal education strictly, because that if you control that very well, you make people have to do those barriers. What I'm saying is, so a lot of the educators that are speaking earlier, the younger people, the people of color, the people out in the communities, they're there because the fossil fuel industry so much dominates education in K-12, and they have found ways to continue to connect with the public and continue to education by getting around those barriers, by things like the STEM festivals. The science festivals came in not only because informal education was picking up a lot of the hands-on science, but then the museums were, and then the fossil fuel industry took over the museums by and large, fortunately not Wild Center. And so then the STEM festivals came up to do what the science festivals weren't doing anymore. So I guess what I'm getting at is, Seth, the question of being able to start talking about, if we're going to be climate educators, we have to talk about what the fossil fuel industry is doing. Otherwise, how can we do that when we're constantly confronted with folks who have a different agenda and 100 times more money than we do? Thanks.
Yeah. You may have seen one of our themes was that climate change disinformation piece. We definitely know that it's incredibly important for everybody, but especially educators, to understand of like how tricky and how convoluted, unfortunately, it's become, because there's so much money pushing out education resources that are scientifically inaccurate, and constantly clouding even the conversation. So we definitely have folks talking about how to have those conversations, what resources educators should be able to trust, and how to support students that are getting a lot of their news from media, how to actually even have that conversation as well. So.
Just ask a question if there's like a list somewhere that like has all these things. Like, is there a list anywhere that has anything? I was wondering if maybe the Aspen Institute had a list. No, we don't know of any lists. If anybody knew about a list, it'd be this group. Eric, did you have your hand up again? Sorry.
No, no problem. Yeah, just some thoughts too, like based on some of the earlier comments too about, I think the place-based opportunity. So when you go to that regional third day, you know, and you have that third day, that's an opportunity. And I like the sequencing. You mentioned changing the sequencing to have that at the end. To me, that makes imminent sense. But to really get folks, you know, a lot of times the powerful teaching that I've experienced and been part of is when you're sort of putting things out there. You're not just presenting a climate science 101, you know, thing and just sort of some factoids to sort of for efficiency. It's sometimes I find you have to kind of do that. You just want to try and blow through some climate science 101 or climate 101 to get to a place. But if you can kind of listen a little bit and sort of let folks, especially on that, it may be encouraging those cohorts like here, I noticed it's 10 strands and we're going to be working with them too on the big initiative here in California. But have folks almost like, what are you experiencing? What are you noticing about the weather in your area? You know, especially for older folks that have been, you know, on the planet for a while and they're really seeing changes. And that can really resonate with some of those folks that you're mentioning you're not reaching yet, the farmers. The farmers know better than anyone what's happening with the weather and how it's affecting their crops and how it's affecting, you know, their livestock and all of that. So those sort of having folks unpack those personal experiences, essentially telling their own stories, right? And relating it to their day-to-day lives and what they're experiencing with respect to weather and climate, they're right. That alone gets them to unpack those two concepts. You know, that weather is, it's changes every day, but I'm really noticing over this last 10 years, this last 20 years, it's been getting hotter. And, you know, as a farmer, you know, or as a person from this region, I see and experience those changes. And then bringing it back to why and how that connects to the climate and how that connects to what the models are showing in the NOAA and NASA data. You know what I mean? So there's sort of this iterative loop that gets folks to really embrace and sort of viscerally understand climate by allowing them to share first or as part of the process, you know. So maybe that's something to think about for that third day in particular as you go regional. And you get folks really thinking about not just what they can do. And I totally believe and hear what you said, Jen, about, you know, starting with solutions. And we're hearing that young people in particular want that. And yet they also need to connect the dots to how what is climate and how is it changing. So anyway, just, yeah, more just again, thoughts about riffing off of what people are talking about.
Great. I know we're getting close to the end of the hour. Thanks for those other, so subject to climate, I feel like I get those emails, but I haven't really been paying attention. So they're trying to, didn't they just also get a bunch, I think they just got a big grant award too. Oh, maybe the Keeling Curve. Did they win one of the Keeling Curve awards? Does anybody
know that they have a new and pretty big collaboration with New Jersey to be the hub for New Jersey's new state initiative for climate change education.
Oh, that's cool.
And so they have this national like resource hub, and they made it pretty New Jersey specific. They don't do a ton of professional development. They're more like, oh, you have a professional development opportunity, we'll host it. But I feel like they're definitely it's pretty solid in the amount of stuff that they have.
Great. Gina, I see your hands up.
Yeah, I also just wanted to show everyone, we are trying to do something similar. We have our clean calendar. This is not something that we've completely finalized yet, but it's kind of been a long time coming on our website, where we created a form where people can submit community, if you're a member of Clean or something, you can submit an event, and all of them are hosted on this calendar. So we're
Oh, that's
kind of
cool.
looking to that too, as a source of PD. Clean's own PD information, of course, is posted, but that is a new initiative that we've been working on as well, right on our homepage.
That's great. I love that idea of having a central hub for resources. It would just be great to be able to go on that calendar and see all of them.
Yeah, absolutely. We just need
Yeah.
we need to start
More people to know about it.
Yeah, we need to market it a little bit better.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, well, that's always a challenge. I think we're right at the top of the hour. Any last comments? Thanks, Seth, for sharing out about the program. Oh, the dog's chasing bees. Sorry, Hannah. Yeah, so thanks, Seth, for sharing out about Climate Gen's program. It's great to see everybody. It is good conversation around the need for, just sort of just talking more and more about like how we can help support climate change education training, especially as states become more, we see more and more of these mandates or like initiatives. And I think that's just going to continue, at least in some states, that's going to continue. So hopefully, and I feel like we're the support system. So anyway, I hope everybody has a great week. Take care, be well. Gina, anything else from Clean?
all set. We're good.
All set? Okay, take care, everybody. Have a great week.
Thanks much.
you.
Take care.
Okay, bye.